absolutely disgusting event that never should have happened. Today is August 9th, 2023, and this is also the anniversary of the nuclear bombing of Hiroshima, of Nagasaki, excuse me. So today we're going to have a very excellent discussion with Helga Zepp-LaRouche, and I would like to open it up to Helga to start us off.
Well, hello. Yeah, we are in a truly historic, changing world. I have said we are experiencing a change like you only see it once in 1,000 years. And what I mean by that is that the epoch, which started with colonialism around 1500, and which lasted now, 600 years, is definitely coming to an end. And we are now on the verge of a new era of mankind, which either will lead to the nuclear annihilation in the Third World War if the present war danger is escalating, or if that can be avoided, I think we will see a period of cooperation among nations on an equal footing, where not one nation will be dominant, but that you will have a partnership of sovereign nations working to the common good of all. Now, some people may think this is utopian, but that is actually what is underway. And I think that the summit, which will take place from the 22nd to the 24th of this month in Johannesburg in South Africa, will be an event leading to tectonic changes in the world situation. These are the words of the South African ambassador to the BRICS, who announced such a change to come. And that's also obvious to anybody who has watched these developments in the recent period. The foreign minister of South Africa, Mrs. Pandor, said that 23 nations of the Global South have applied formally to be part of the BRICS, and about 20 or so more have informally announced their interest to do so in the future. 67 leaders of the Global South of Africa, that is, have been invited to attend the summit. So this will be a quite incredibly important event. President Xi Jinping of China not only will attend in person, but he then will have a state visit in South Africa following the summit. So I think that there will be dramatic changes coming out of this summit. And, it is my absolute hope, and that's what our whole effort in organizing has been, is that the Western countries should not see this as a threat, which unfortunately most of them have done so far. It's not a threat, it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to cooperate and establish finally, the end of colonialism, to establish a relationship among nations, where, people start to treat each other as equals. And I think that is a genie which cannot be put back in the bottle, because, the countries of the Global South, in the tradition of the non-aligned movement of Nehru, of Sukarno, of Tito, Nasser, all these people who were founders of the non-aligned movement, I mean, they are now, in a certain sense, grown up, because they have gone through incredible battles. Because when they attempted to establish a new world economic order in the 60s, in the 50s, in the 60s, in the 70s, they were always answered by, coups, destabilizations. But now the world is changing, because, you have now the economic growth right now is not taking place any longer in the G7. They are clearly falling behind. The economic growth is happening among the most important, most developed countries in the Global South. Naturally, China is in the lead. and very exciting. The news now comes from the Great Bay Area in China, that is the region of Shenzhen, Guangdong, Shanghai, Hong Kong, Macau. This region, which I think has 80 million people altogether, and it's the locomotive of the world economy. So if you just take that region of 80 million people, they would be number 12s in terms of economies, just this region. And they announced that they will have now a maglev system with a maglev train going 650 kilometers per hour. Now that's really fantastic, and that will be on a half-hour tact. In other words, these cities will be connected every half hour by such a train, and this is so breathtaking. And if you think about the incredible bridge between Hong Kong and Shanghai, and Hong Kong and Shenzhen, I was on that bridge a couple of years ago before it was quite finished. And it's a fantastic piece of engineering, which they did. I think 120 engineers and introduced patents, Chinese engineers. And, rather for the West to be, on the high horse and say, look, this is a systemic threat, you should enjoy to cooperate. I mean, it's so unbelievably, the economic engine is clearly China. It's clearly the Asian countries. And Germany, which is right now, unfortunately, crashing against the wall because of a evil government. I can only say that what the present economic minister is doing is not just the height of incompetence, but it's outright evil, because it's destroying the livelihood of generations of work, rebuilding Germany after the Second World War. This guy is just ruining it all, and he should be driven out of office at the earliest possible occasion. But rather than looking at these developments as a threat, the West should cooperate. I mean, with the present development, Germany, which is still the number 6 in terms of the GDP output, they will soon be falling behind. Germany used to be number 4, now it's number 6. And right now, Brazil and Indonesia are quickly developing, and they will bypass Germany in a very short period of time. And rather than regarding all of that as a threat, China has offered many, many times the Belt and Road Initiative is open to everybody. They have even made a special model for cooperation for great power relationship, especially for the cooperation between China and the United States. And, China is putting a great hope that Europe would find itself interest in cooperate with China. And then naturally the joint ventures in Africa and in other Asian countries in Latin America would be the way to go. So, I think in that sense, we are at a total crossroad. Naturally, the war danger is looming, because, as it becomes clearer that the war in Ukraine cannot be won conventionally, at least not, not for sure, not the NATO side will not win, because all these weapons and more weapons and more weapons are leading to the slaughter of the Ukrainian people. I mean, they are being destroyed, and the casualty numbers which are coming are absolutely horrendous. So that is why, our peace demonstration this past Sunday in front of the United Nations was so absolutely crucial. I'm very happy about it, and Anastasia, you did a tremendous job together with Irene, being the moderators of it. But it was a very broad alliance of people, and this is the alternative. We should mobilize not only to stop the war, but to get the whole world to cooperate with the new emerging economic order, and then we can solve all problems. So I want to stop here because I'm sure that there are questions.
Thank you, Helga. I'm sure Irene Mavroukakis will be really happy to hear that you thought we did an excellent job. Um, I'd also like to point out that we had a beautiful concert that happened right after the UN rally as well, which was a very sublime expression of humanity. And I think all of the people who participated in that, the singers, the orchestra, many of which were just, I mean, these are people that were just brought in through passion and networks and just wanted to express their love of mankind in an attempt to raise everybody's souls to the highest level to stop nuclear war. So this is quite amazing. We had a question that came in from Thomas. He says, "Thanks for a beautiful concert on Sunday. It was really good and important to bring this kind of beauty out to the people in this period of time. In this critical time of history, with the great danger and at the same time a great opportunity, what are the best ways to succeed to bring the necessary change in the transatlantic policy? Do you think the retrospective government will stand up to the pressure of the populations when the leadership in the West has been so arrogant and morally bankrupt towards their own populations and the rest of the world?" What are your thoughts, Helga?
Well, I think there is a point to what you are saying, that they're pretty oblivious to almost everything. But there is such a thing as elections, which fortunately have not yet abandoned. So they have to watch what is the result of their policies. I think concerning the I think the U.S. election is almost 1 year and a quarter or so away, so that's a long, long time. So uh, in Germany, we also have elections next year for the European Parliament, and then after that, the federal. So all of these things are way in the future, and the crisis is very acute. So I think it is important to keep up this kind of mobilization. We for sure will have soon a new Schiller Institute conference, probably hybrid or virtual. But then we should also, really build these demonstrations, because I think it is quite important that people see that there is an alternative, and the fact that we have, the internet, and we have alternative media, we have social media, we can start building this. I don't think that that alone will do it, because the military war machine is quite determined to keep making profit by having these wars. But I think it's a combination of things. Fortunately, we have a whole number of top leaders who I think are very reasonable. I would say that in the global south, you have several outstanding people who have courage, who have moral integrity, and I would not underestimate their coming into the play in the strategic developments. Naturally, the really crucial question is what will happen in the United States, what will happen in Germany. These are two absolutely crucial countries. And then naturally, France, Italy, other countries in Europe are crucial. So I think I can only say, help us to mobilize on a continuous basis. The first step being, take the video from the rally of the 6th of August, which is on the internet, on our website. Make sure that people also watch the concert, because, both the spirituals which were sung and some other songs, but also especially Mozart's Requiem. It is important, because we are so much on the verge of losing humanity if it comes to war, that we need, as you just said, Anastasia, we need to mobilize the highest and most noble sentiments in people, and we have to bring out the best humanity in them. And that is why spread the concert, spread the video, come to our future mobilizations, and just contact us and stay with us in this mobilization, because I have somehow the distinct feeling, and it's not just a feeling, it's informed by a lot of facts, but it's not just facts, that we are in a period, maybe it's very difficult to say, maybe the next half year, maybe the next year, maybe the next 1.5 years, 2 years, but in this period, I think the decision will be made in which direction humanity goes. And I think in periods like that, it is the contribution of every single individual which will make a difference. So just contact us and mobilize with us.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, we had sister rallies all over the world, not just in Europe and the United States, but in uh, Asian nations. We had African support. We had people from all over the world who were coming out as an expression of love for mankind and crying out that we must stop nuclear war. So wherever you're from, please reach out to us, get in contact with the Schiller Institute, contact Humanity for Peace. We have a great website, humanityforpeace.net, and we'll be breaking out more of these things so you can share it out and help you with your organizing. I think one of the really great things that's coming out of this from the International Peace Coalition work that we've been doing, Helga, is that this idea that you had to unite the global South anti-imperialist movement, what you're seeing with the BRICS process, the Africa Summit, all this, with the peace movement is working. That this is a very inspiring moment for people. So with that, I want to ask this question, which comes from Alam, excuse me. He says, why is the West, particularly Europe, silent when they are faced with uncontrolled migration due to some countries like France looting African resources without shame? A rich country getting taxes from its former colonies is not only shameful, but evil. When all Europeans are going to have when are Europeans going to have a human consciousness that normally takes away the animal in us to act humanely and become fair? If that is not in the psyche of the French, at least they should stop the shameful act of gangster-like paraging of poor countries by imposing a tax and exploiting their minerals without paying a just price. What are your thoughts on this, Helga?
Well, I wish it would be only France who is pushing colonial policies. Unfortunately, it is up to now the G7. It's the so-called West NATO countries. They're all in it. I don't think all the people are in it because there are people like, for example, the former deputy economic minister of Italy, Michele Geraci. He made recently, a couple of days ago, a very excellent intervention by saying, that the way to solve the refugee crisis is to bring in development, and that Europe should join hands with China and help to develop the infrastructure and all the other requirements, industry, agriculture. And I think that is the way. I mean, we are pushing very hard in this direction, and I think the Africa, in my view, is the continent of the future. We have now 2023. In only 25 more years, about Africa will have at least 2.5 billion people. Geraci just said soon Africa will have 4 billion people, and then it will be the continent with the youngest average age of people. Most people will be below 20, and then obviously, if we provide the means, that is millions and hundreds of millions of productive jobs, but there is no reason why Africa cannot become the absolute economic miracle of the future. And I think that that is what we should be working towards. I think, you are right with your criticism, because now, until now, the international corporations, they were in the countries of the global south to help them, in quote, by, mining and then selling the raw materials, but making the vast part of the profit, and the countries who actually own these resources would have a tiny, tiny trickle. And that is really what's going on now behind this Niger developments, which is completely portrayed wrongly by the Western media. The real issue there is, take Niger, for example. They have large resources of uranium. They produce and export about 1/3 of all the uranium which France needs for its nuclear power energy. They basically, now the new government suspended the export of uranium to France, because obviously they think that the present trade conditions are completely unjust. Now, so you have an incredibly explosive situation. The neighbors, Mali, Burkina Faso, Chad, Algeria, all these governments basically said they support the government change in Niger. The new president of Nigeria, who is also the head of ECOWAS, wanted to have a military intervention. Obviously, this was very much supported by the EU and by, I guess, the United States. But fortunately, the Nigerian Senate voted against it. And according to the Nigerian constitution, this is binding. So for the time being, this military intervention has been stopped. And people in the region, they are not they're not forgetting what was the result of the NATO intervention in Libya. Look at what happened. They killed Gaddafi, and they threw Libya into a complete chaos, and the country has not recovered from it yet. Look at Iraq. They killed Saddam Hussein, and Iraq, which was on a very promising path to modernization. Women had all opportunities to go to the university. The infrastructure was developing incredibly well. And now the country is still in a terrible crisis. So this is all known. People don't forget these things. And that is why they were all against the military intervention. And, the more the West is pushing this, the more the West will discredit itself. So, I think it's really the end of colonialism, where the countries of Africa and other regions in the world demand that they should control their own resources. And what would be more just than that? They demand that they develop their own production, their own industry, to generate the income, so that they become middle-level income countries as quickly as possible. And that should be supported. That is the legitimate right of every nation on the planet. So you can tell the intention of people by looking what they are saying in this conflict. Is if they say, "Oh, democracy and freedom of the press," well, then they should take their own nose, and before they start criticizing other countries, they should bring their own house in order. But I think it's a very exciting moment, and we should support this development, because it is the right of every country to take care of their people and develop.
Excellent. Actually, on the situation in Niger, we do have a question that has come in from John in relation to this. He says, Africa is taking a true stance against Western imperialism, particularly Niger. Do you think that Niger will ultimately be successful against the West and the ECOWAS, the imperialism, with the support of its neighbors? Mali has already announced that they will help defend Niger against military attacks, and I've heard reports that Russia is sending the Wagner Group to defend Niger as well. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think there is a very good chance that they will succeed because it is the sentiment of the vast majority of African countries who think likewise. Now, Victoria Nuland, who has become sort of infamous because of her appearance on the Maidan in 2014, where she was distributing cookies to the people in, demonstrating and rioting in the end. And she bragged that the State Department spent $5 billion on NGOs in Ukraine alone. So she had clearly a role in all of that. What happened, the coup. She was bragging. She said that she was talking in a telephone call with the U.S. ambassador in Kiev, Payet, and this was somehow recorded and it became public. And she's on the tape saying, F the EU. Basically, we will decide who will be the next head of government. Our guy Yatsenyuk, she was pushing. So naturally, when she goes to a country like a country in a certain unstable situation or crisis point like Niger right now, and she insisted to talk to the deposed former president, which was denied. She only could talk to him on the telephone. And she said that she had some very difficult and partially unpleasant discussions with the present government. And then she obviously told them that they should not call in the Wagner group. And Prigozhin said, oh, he felt very honored that Mrs. Nuland was paying so much attention to them. I don't think the Wagner group will go in, or I have no detailed knowledge about this, but I think apart from these particulars, I think the general trend is in the direction of Africa wants to assert itself, and it has important friends. I think China is definitely a friend of Africa. There are some people who say that friendship among nations is not possible, but Xi Jinping said repeatedly that China is the friend of Africa, and many African leaders have said that they find that the behavior of China proves that they are a true friend of the African nations. And Russia also is extremely well remembered because it did help way back. The Soviet Union helped African nations to gain their independence, and that has also not been forgotten. And now Russia is offering nuclear energy, nuclear technology to African nations. So they're not alone. And I can only say the more quickly the European nations and even the United States would say, okay, let's stop our confrontation and let's cooperate. That's also what Geraci said. There is so much to do in Africa. There is room for everybody. So why not join hands and collaborate rather than trying to, become or remain the dominant power and get everybody else killed? You are muted. I can't hear you.
I'm sorry. Can you hear me now? Okay. I was just saying that we actually have a number of people in the participating today who were organizers for Humanity for Peace, not just in the United States, but around the world. And many folks are thinking, what are we going to do next? How are we going to keep organizing this forward? A question comes in from, I'm sorry if I butcher your name, Dibashi. They ask, how do we develop the upcoming leaders with the right skills, attitudes, and braveness to stand up to these coming challenges? What do you think we should do?
Well, there is, first of all, the LaRouche library. We are in the process of publishing the entire life work of my late husband, and he has written so many things, which even if they were written 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago, they are like a guideline what to do. For example, he wrote probably more than 20 years ago a very important article called Trade Without Currency, which was the proposal for a reserve currency based on commodities rather than on monetary values. And that is what is being discussed right now. And countries are trying to figure out exactly how to do it. That will be an issue at the upcoming BRICS summit. I don't think it will immediately lead to a joint currency, because this is a very difficult process, as we have seen with the euro, which was not done well and it's not functioning well. So it does require a lot of work. There are many other articles. I would suggest that the first step is to really start to become an expert in economics, study the American system of economy as it was developed by Leibniz, by Friedrich List, by Alexander Hamilton, by Henry C. Carey, and as it was expanded by Lyndon LaRouche. That idea of how to make an economy work is something which is absolutely comprehensible, and one can study it. Then naturally we need to have methodological, philosophical education, where we take the best minds humanity has produced so far, Confucius, Plato, the Vedic writings of India, Leibniz, Cusanus, many others. So get in contact with the Schiller Institute, and we will, give you a reading list of how you can really, as quickly as possible, take the necessary intellectual ammunition to win this fight. And we can always discuss these things more in depth if you want.
Yeah, actually, I was just thinking as you were talking, Helga, because I've been listening back on old recordings of Lyndon LaRouche, your husband, and papers to remind myself and regain inspiration for organizing what was just pulled together. And it's never become more clear that Lynn would always talk about this idea of it's between the notes. It's not what you say. It's between the notes. It's something that actually comes from you, that is expressed to other people, that activates them. And I was thinking about all these new organizers, young, old, wherever you're from in the world. I wanted to ask you, it's similar to what Dayashi was asking, but I guess it's more specific. It seems to me that people also need to have this cultural training so they can have the emotional fortitude to deal with these kinds of questions. Um, I've been listening to a lot of the spirituals and like Schubert's Ninth, done by Furtwängler, and this idea that Furtwängler had of staying in Germany during Nazi Germany in order to save his people and uplift people to the highest concept of man. And I wanted to get your recommendation. I wanted to ask you your recommendation of how you think I should be approaching people to train them in this kind of way. What do you think is the best avenue to do that?
Oh, I think that requires a curriculum, and I think we need teams of people maybe we should think about Schiller Academy. I can only remember at the beginning of the 80s, we had a network of hundreds of professors, scientists, researchers, and we were actually thinking about setting up universities. And this was in a very advanced state, because we had some of the top scientists like Professor Moon, many others of the Fusion Energy Foundation at the time. And the idea to set up academies or private universities, and if states want, even state universities, that is definitely a goal which sooner or later will come on the horizon. And I think in the meantime, I think basic, like study groups on the most important topics is what I would recommend, because it's an enormous field. You have universal history, music, natural science, poetry, painting, all kinds of naturally space related sciences, life sciences. So it's a huge field. But I think you have to start to build a solid foundation of classical sources. You have to be familiar with the most important writings of mankind up to the present time, and you don't need all footnotes and all professors and their comments, but you have to know the most important ones and the most important breakthroughs, because if you study which qualitative breakthroughs were made in science, in music, in other arts, it becomes a habit of thinking. You will learn to think in terms of seeking the creative solution which has not been thought out before. And that's a way of thinking. It's not a question of, sure, you need a lot of foundations, but there are people who learn for the rest of their life, and they just never have a creative thought because they have the wrong method. If you are deductive or inductive or positivist or all of these things, you will never come up with a creative idea. So it's very much a method of thinking, and I think that comes, for example, when you study, great music. For example, Schubert songs. You have to study the poetry, you have to study the composition, and then you will see why, for example, the Lied, especially the German Lied, Linda LaRouche called the Rosetta Stone, because it opens poetry, it opens music, it opens the level of art which is above anything in prose. So there are lots of things, but it requires some work. But we should probably think about that some more, how to offer these things.
Thank you. No, that's very useful. Thank you for your answer. With that, I'd like to thank everybody for all of their questions and for participating all over the world in this dialogue. And see, Helga, if you have any closing remarks for today.
Yes, don't be pessimistic. Many people say, those people who are not completely brainwashed by the mainstream, NATO and the way to look at Russia and China and look at the developing countries as enemies. There are a lot of people who have second thoughts and say we should have a new world economic order which allows for the survival of every nation on the planet. But they tend to be pessimistic. They say, oh, these forces are so powerful, I can't do anything. And then, that pessimism leads them to be passive. And I think that is something you should recognize as a problem to be rooted out, because once you start to organize your fellow citizen, your family, there are sometimes a problem because they're in habits. But once you start to organize, you will realize, no, there's so much to do. Start to read relevant literature, which I was talking about before, and become active. And this is not a period to sit on the fence, because the very destiny of mankind will be decided. Either we will cease to exist if it all leads to a big war, including the exchange of nuclear weapons, then that's it. Then that was it for all of mankind. Or we will really come to a new system where, the relations among nations will be ordered in a certain way, like within a family, where you want the best for the other. And that's very much the idea of the Schiller Institute, which is now, I always forget, soon it will be 40 years. But that was the very idea from the beginning, that relations among nations should be organized in such a way that you concentrate on bringing out the best in the other and vice versa, by focusing on the best historical and cultural tradition and sharing what you have produced best as a nation or a culture. And then the collaboration in relations among nations and civilizations would be very, very easy. So that is something to commit yourself to help us building.
Thank you. I think this has been a really amazing organizing discussion and where we're going to be going from here. And people, please keep an eye out. We'll be having lots of events going on. Thank you, Helga, for your response. And thank you, everybody, for your questions. And please join us next week for another webcast with Helga Zepp-LaRouche. Thank you, Helga. Thank you, Helga.
Yes, bye bye till next week.